people will begin to get desperate as far as and reevaluate what they think of Christ. All of that because of what's not happening in their life. Prophetically, people will begin to lose hope. Now, anything prophetically has happened flawlessly. I mean, flawlessly. There are many people who read the Bible conventionally. In other words, they're looking for real-world examples of how things will unfold. Well, usually, when prophecy unfolds, the conventional part takes place, but the spiritual part is nothing less than astounding, right? We're going to address that tonight because a storm is on its way, an all-consuming storm, a storm that's promised to touch everybody. How many of you would pray to the Lord for something and simply expect him to fulfill it? Many people would. And because he did not fulfill certain things in their lives, they feel somehow the Word of God is at fault. Or possibly the Lord is not caring about them. Or circumstances have become too heavy and they're just simply overburdened. We have the Middle East. It's blowing up. There are 3 war fronts in the Middle East, going all the way into Russia also. We have a war front there. Russia is fighting on 2 fronts in the Middle East and with Ukraine. In the Middle East by way of Syria. We have a power structure being formed. We have nations about to make land grabs. We do. We have greater instabilities in geological happenings, right? We're going through something. I can't break loose of this Babylon Tower thing. I can't. Especially when you realize the statue in Babylon, when you realize Daniel chapter 2, for example, the lion, the leopard, the bear, right? Historically, I know what people have accepted for a long time, but historically, when you follow the nations and the breakup of those nations into the formation of these sub-nations, you begin to see it. For example, the bear. The bear with iron teeth. That's very significant. In Daniel 7, right? The bear with iron teeth. Do you guys know what the iron stands for? Iron. Rome. When you look at the statue that King Nebuchadnezzar saw, right? You can clearly see the progressive state of the nations. And it was so clearly defined. And everything, for example, the 10 toes of that statue, right? The 10 toes. The feet, part iron, part clay, had 10 toes. All these things were emphasized. And if you start looking at the language, I mean, really concentrating on the language, you begin to see that these are nations which came out of Rome. The Roman Empire dissolved. It was dissolved. It was split up into other nations, right? It was split up into the Franks, Anglo-Saxons, Burgundians, the Visigoths, the Alemanni, the Lombards, who's the other? Sueves, right? The Ostrogoths, Beruli, and the Vandals. 3 of those nations went extinct. 3 of them did. Now, of course, Portuguese, that was the Suevi. French, the Franks, English, Anglo-Saxons, Burgundians, the Swiss, Visigoths, the Spanish, Lombard, those are the Italians, and the Germans were the Alemanni, right? Everything is accounted for. Everything is here. Everything is here. And out of the part of the statue, part of the one kingdom with the 10 horns, right? Of whom 3 fell and 1 rose. That's where the Antichrist comes from. That's where he comes from. So, did you guys know that the Roman Empire was split into 2 halves? Many people don't know that. It was split into 2 specific parts. And I think this is where the ideology of the Vatican comes into play. Now, as I said last night with Pastor Paul, the Spirit, no doubt, is in operation. The Spirit has fulfilled a foreshadowing of what the Antichrist actually is. And that's been fulfilled, right? These things have been happening on the earth, which is why I always say you're in the middle of something. Things are not coming. You're in the middle of things. When they begin to manifest, it's too late. Just like Jesus said. Jesus says time, there's only one global influence that has been in power this entire time. When Rome dissolved and it split up into those 10 portions, they've been in power this entire time. China is not in power. It's not. The Middle East is not in power. I think it's the Vatican, but we already know the Vatican. Right? Now, when the wicked is revealed, he begins to do something. He only has a short space to continue. See, when this thing shows itself, it only has 3.5 years to accomplish what it needs to accomplish. Because there are folks out there right now they're out there. They need things badly. Right? And if they see someone perform a miracle, we know deep down in our hearts when we are in need of things. If we find a person that can actually fulfill it, we're going to gravitate towards that. Many would gravitate towards that individual right now. No one's going to doubt that. The Christian, should they ever think that they personally have the power, or they even express that it's by their own power they're doing something, there's a consequence. Let me ask you guys something. If you were to cast a spirit out of somebody, how would you do it? You just go up and cast it out? Anybody? Is that what you do? Just go up and cast that thing out? Let me share something with you very important. First thing you do is you have to hear from your Father in heaven. Do you know that? And do you know why? You may see a person under duress from a demonic entity, but your Father in heaven may have this person go through a process, and no one's going to interfere with it. Just so you know. So you always need to know from the Most High, are you allowed to go to that person or that person? In other words, you cannot assign yourself to just jump out there like Rambo and do that. You must hear from your Father in heaven. You must hear from him. If you're older, you understand something. If you try to help somebody out that God has in a trial, he'll take away your power to help that person out. Spirits. Many spirits of the wrong type. Their attachment to people will be seen soon. And the world is not going to care. The world is going to celebrate it. The world is being indoctrinated right now. You know what? 15 years ago, you could not talk to a civilian or to a person out there about spirits. You couldn't do it. Right now, today, you can almost talk to anybody about spirits. Back then, when you couldn't have an open conversation about spirits, A lot of people did not know a great deal about spirits. Not so today. Today they have been educated by the world. Spirits to be human spirits on this earthly plane in a dimension right outside of ours. Right now, there are people who have opened their homes to spirits. There are hotels of whom the managers agree to occupy the hotel and have people occupy it side by side with spirits. There are even more people who have nightly conversations and seances and Ouija board sessions with spirits. They're in your neighborhoods. You remember that dream I shared with you guys a long time ago? Me and this other guy, we were in this building, and we had these suits on, right? And they looked like pressure suits. Some mechanical aided pressure suits. They were pretty, and we were there, and I was wondering, what in the world am I doing in this thing? And so I'm following this guy around, so we go out into the street. And the first thing we see are scorpions. So we see a bunch of scorpions, and we start stomping on the scorpions, right? We get them handled. We go back into this building, and all of a sudden spiders come out from everywhere. Now, these spiders began to devour the scorpions. And they were trying to get to us. And I was trying to tell this other guy, put your helmet on, but it was too late. It was too late. Without the helmet, as it turns out, there's no protection from those things. So I was in that dream. It scared the peanuts out of my M&Ms. It did. So I put the helmet on. I could see these spiders going all over it, but they couldn't get in. And I had full autonomy because they couldn't get in. I found out something. Without the helmet, the suit was very heavy, right? It's very heavy. It's very difficult to move and everything else, and we barely survived the scorpions. So there was a season of scorpions that came. When the spiders came, it was all she wrote. They came to devour everything, even the scorpions. And so I was rushing to put the helmet on, praying that the helmet was sealed right. Storm. A storm where the soot and the ash will reach the surface of the earth with cinders in it. Storm with horizontal smoke, thick smoke and ash. Can you imagine that? There are things that in that dream that involve Trump. And I'm not talking about the stone steps, no. So there are two events that specifically concern Trump that have me concerned. Very good concerned. It's when he was getting out of a car in a secured place where there are beige buildings. He was near something with beige buildings getting out of a car. One of the people in that convoy, they started something. And it changed President Trump into a total different person. Changed him, just like Satan is famous of doing, right? That's why I keep telling people, Satan will often wait until a person reaches this point of power, and then he steps in to usurp the person. If the church, if the ecclesia, if the people that believe in Christ, if they're not going to be obedient, this time we lose. This time our misstep will cost us much. You won't be touched with Christ. You won't be touched. Do you know there are people that were at Chernobyl in the strike zone, you could say, in the zone where radiation was pouring out, and they have zero radiation accumulation. Do you know that? None. Do you know that these weird craft that come around can cause nuclear materials to become inert? Now, like this earthquake that was in California. Did anybody ever note what took place right before that earthquake? See, that earthquake in California just so happens to be in a place where a lot of people are looking. How convenient. That will make sense if you start looking into the subject. So your jaw can drop yourself once you look into it. Okay? But you better believe things are happening on a scale that is far above what anybody suspected. When it's fully manifest, it's going to be too late. It's going to be too late. GGM says snippers. Yeah, that's eerie, isn't it? It's eerie. It's eerie because it reminded me of what I saw on the East Coast, specifically for the states of Virginia, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and South Carolina. They had to be evacuated. There are people in uniforms, hazmat uniforms, white tie, special assignments with sniffers. And that happened right after the rodents migrated to the north. So rodents migrated to the north, which is what they've been doing for some time. They migrated to the north, and then these folks with sniffers came out. Right after that, people were given 24 hours to pack necessities and leave the East Coast. There were areas on the East Coast fully evacuated under forced evacuations. On one part of that highway, I saw some big arches, and that explains some of the other threats that we have going on today. Dealing with that same subject with sniffers. So we are in a challenging time. We know that terrorists, they want to hit. As of late, this is as of 3 days ago. Now it's known they want to hit a nuclear facility. There's always been some pressure of a nuclear threat, right? But now we know they want to infiltrate and totally bring down a nuclear facility, period. That's as of 3 days ago. In the 70s, the same thing has been happening. There have been interventions over military bases. There have been activities that took place that have, caused us to avoid nuclear war. And there have been some incidences where nuclear war almost started because of these things. There have been soldiers and units who have fired at these things, and these things fired something back. There have been people seriously hurt by these things. But there have been others who have been totally augmented by these things. See, these are the same ones that chose the mark. These are the same ones that were once with us. You could say they're with us right now, but in those days, they will have altered their own path. Instead of the way of forgiveness, they chose the way of accusation and other things. That's how they're going to end up. They're going to have no defense against those spirits, or believe they have no defense against those spirits. But let me share this with you. There are people who live in the world just like that right now. They cower in the corners of their homes. They're terrified to move. They're terrified to eat or anything else. That's already happening. That's been happening for a long time. Brother Mike, they had these nuclear weapons long ago as well. Yeah, something akin to them. Yeah, they did. Actually, uranium itself was found historically during cowboy days, during early settlement days. People, of course, they didn't know what it was. But even long before that, there are signs that some nuclear explosions took place all across the face of the earth. Right? All across the face of the earth. I personally believe that what we see right now, what we have right now is simply a recreation of what used to be. There is archaeological evidence. The same stuff we use right now, computers and the like, electronic devices, so on and so forth. These same representations are in the past. They're in the past. Has it been used to identify United Healthcare shooter? Thanks, brother. It was. AI was used to identify the shooter. It most certainly was. But let me share this with you. That would spook the populace if that were publicized in an official way, don't you think? If they showed that AI identified this person as soon as it saw him on camera, people in the world would cry they would cry foul. They said, no, you can't have that technology. See, they say right now, because they didn't come out and say it, they said, well, nobody detected that face. And because people believe that, people are putting their hands on their hips saying, well, why don't they use AI to detect it? Well, they did. They did. They already did that. Mike, is it possible for two people who did not know each other to have three similar dreams? Yes. Yeah, I told you guys I had a dream with a person that was in close proximity. We were in uniform. We had the exact same dream. And when we woke up, we were talking about the dream. When we noticed we had the same dream, it was something else. It really was. It took him back a little bit. It took me back too. I tell you something, when things like that happen more than once, you start to realize that the world is a good teacher of limitations, that there are plenty of things that are possible, and that we do not understand the nature of life the way we posture that we do. We don't. When it says the kings will be given 1 hour with the beast, how long is that hour? Well, the hour is not something you time, right? It is simple to say that they're going to give their power and their authority and everything over to the beast. The time the beast is given to do his thing in the earth, we know that's 3.5 years, right? So they're going to give their power over to the beast. That 1 hour is a representation of a allocation of time. That's all. And some of you understand that because there are things that the Lord will give you, but as soon as you begin to articulate it, it gets taken away. The more you write, the less you remember, right? If you leave it alone, it's yours. But if you ever try to make it seem like it's your discovery, it's going to be taken from you. And you guys know exactly what I'm talking about, right? You know what I'm talking about. Lord knows I'm doing my part. Listen, keep COT in prayers. So, because this house is in your hands. Remember that. The Lord put this in your hands. So hopefully you'll pray for this house because it's in your hands.